I wanted to, the main focus of today is obviously reading the Christmas story and just really thinking about that. How often do we go through all of Christmas and we do all of the events and all of the things, but it becomes kind of routine, and sometimes we don't take a time to actually sit down. No, we're going to read through the Christmas story. One of the great things that I remember as a kid is you always have the television specials that would come out that were Christmas, right? And you'd have Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, you'd have Frosty the Snowman, and then Charlie Brown's Christmas. And actually, that's one of my favorite. I think, especially at that time, it's amazing to watch them now and compare with the technology and how things have changed. Sometimes it's hard to keep kids' attention now, just the way that they were. But one of the great things about Charlie Brown's Christmas is there at the end, when they're getting ready for the pageant, I believe it's Linus, if my memory is correct, he actually reads through the Christmas story, or at least Luke chapter 2 of the Christmas story, and reads through the whole thing. And it's really interesting because here this little cartoon is all of a sudden reminding us, this is what it's all about. And Christmas can be tough because we can get so wrapped up in doing other things that are actually good and reflect the Christmas spirit, right? We do things for other people. We're trying to find gifts to show other people how much we care for them. A lot of people do extra volunteer work. All of that stuff is really good and good things to do, but if we're not careful, it can start pulling us away from what Christmas really is all about. And then we start seeing Christmas as a chore, right? And I was thinking about this the other day, and it was whenever I was driving up at night to our house, and of course the Christmas lights, and I was like, that really looks nice. I like that. It just kind of puts a smile on your face. But then I also remembered what I was feeling like whenever I was putting up all of those lights, right? and then all of a sudden my mind goes to, man, I'm going to have to take all of those lights down, right? and so we have this weird mix of the reality of life, that life keeps going, and there's frustrating things in the midst of that life, right? And if we're not careful, we can let those things kind of just help us and it causes us just to skip past the things that are really important. And I want to look at just a short little verse there in Luke at the end of the traditional Christmas story, where it's talking about Mary. And so all of this stuff has happened. She's now given birth to a child. These smelly shepherds have come in, and they have left. And it says this is verse 19 of chapter 2 of Luke. But Mary treasured up all of these things and pondered them in her heart. That's a simple verse, but I like to think about that. What was she doing there? Treasuring up. So she's kind of taking inventory, if you will, of all the things that have happened, and then pondering them, right? And pondering, that's an interesting word. The word kind of means weighing. It's kind of taking each thing that you've treasured up, right? All of the different things that have come together to form this and have ended at this moment, and then you're pondering them. You're thinking about them and how they're going to impact the future. Right? This isn't just kind of a casually, remembering. This is something that you're kind of embedding into your memory, right? And we look at it sometimes, and I think we say, well, yeah, of course that's what you would do. You just had a baby. It's such a wonderful occasion. Of course that's a wonderful time. But I want you to think about it practically. If you're not careful, what you could allow yourself to do as Mary in that situation. Right? This whole thing has kind of been a disaster, right? From the very beginning, right? All of a sudden, you think your life is going one direction, and you're going to marry Joseph, and you're going to have children together, and you're going to live just the normal life. And so you're on the way to that happening. And then all of a sudden, you find that you're pregnant with not Joseph's child. right? And all of a sudden you have to get through that. How are me and Joseph, how are we going to reconcile this? Are we going to be able to? And then once you accept that, then you have to get your family to accept that. Because if not, that means you're never really going to have ties with your family the rest of the time. Right? So then you work on that. Then you have to work on, well, what about friends? What about the community? How do we start fixing that image? Right? All of those things. This would have been very challenging for them. It would have been very frustrating. And then, as you're getting close to the end of the pregnancy, which pregnancy, not that I can speak from experience, but the closer you get to the end, it seems to be a little bit more uncomfortable, right? You're just kind of ready for, okay, it's time, right? You know, and all of a sudden, the stupid governor, right, who is Roman, who you don't like anyway, says, oh, wait, now you have to go all to your hometowns to register, right? Time for a census, right? There aren't census takers, so now you have to travel down. And by the way, I don't know this completely, but I'm going to say with the census comes some sort of tax obligation, right? I wonder if Jesus got in under the tax deal where it was a benefit for him, or if he should have been born a few days later to the next year. But all of this is happening. That would have been frustrating. So now Mary and Joseph have to go to Bethlehem when she is late in her pregnancy, right? Then they get there, and there's no place for them to stay. And going through that, you know, all of these things are frustrating. Then they get there, they are able to have the baby, but they have the baby in a stable, right? You know, I mean, just the frustration that it would have come with that, the fear. Man, this is really how this is going to start, right? And then these random guys show up, right? If you look at it, if you take out what we know, and even Mary, if you get caught up in just the daily routine of what that would have been, that could be a very frustrating situation. But it's interesting what Mary does, and what's important for us to do is she's able to treasure all of that, to ponder that, to embed that in memory. And rather than looking at it as something that was frustrating, she starts looking at it, I believe it's fairly obvious, as look at what God is doing. Look at how God is working all of this together, even in the midst of us having to deal with the realities of life, which are not fair and which are not fun, right? That God was still encouraging them, right? God didn't have to send shepherds, right? But he did. And don't you know that had to be, as Mary was pondering that is just an affirmation. You know, she hadn't heard from the angel in 9 months, right? Right? But this is a reminder, oh, that was true what I experienced 9 months ago, right? There is something different about this child, right? It's always wonderful to have the birth of a child, but there's something different about this one, and that was reiterated and affirmed. You know, God was reaching out and showing them, giving them glimpses of hope and encouragement in the midst of all of the frustrating things that they were having to deal with. You know, I think there's something for us to learn about that. That life, man, if we're not careful, we're going to focus only on the frustration of it. Because guess what? That's the reality. That's what we live in. And there's a lot of times we're encouraged to kind of focus on that, focus on the things that go wrong, right? To focus on the fact of how miserable it is to put up the Christmas decorations, and we forget to enjoy them for the month that they're out, right? How often would it benefit us if we would take time to ponder what God is doing around us? And sometimes that means that we have to look at things a different way, right? That we have to recognize and think about, you know what? God is present even in the messiness of all of this, right? You know, how many times have you probably thought this, and I know I've thought this, I've heard this in talking with people, and they'll talk about difficult times in their life, and they'll say, you know, now that I'm 20 years past, and as I look back, I see how God was involved in that. And that's a powerful thing. That's something that's really, really good for us to be able to do. But what if we tried to be a little bit more intentional about when we're in the middle of that rough time in our life, that we start looking for how God is involved, right? Because God brings something beautiful even into the midst of the mess of life. It's what he did with Jesus. It's what he does in all of our lives. No matter what you're going through, God has something beautiful for you. You can experience his grace and his love, even as life sometimes comes crashing down around you. But sometimes we have to be intentional about looking for it. And just like Mary, after the smelly, stinky shepherds left, she was probably like, oh, thank heavens. She started thinking about, look at what God has done. And I have no doubt that as she was pondering those things, she knew that the rest of her life, no matter what it would bring, and it would bring a lot of heartbreak, bring a lot of difficulty, but I have no doubt she left that manger, she left that stable, knowing that God was going to be with her. Let's go to him in prayer.